Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this week's VIN-dow with Robert Hollinshead. Good day to you, Bob.
Good morning, sir. How are you?
Starting to cool down up here in the hinterlands. We're starting to get some, I don't even know what it is in Fahrenheit it would be, but we're 10 degrees at night and 15, 20 Celsius in the day. So the winter is coming, or maybe it's just a cold spell. But
it's interesting, right? It does happen every year. It's bad when it happens, but then everybody says they like the season, so it's a good thing. But you know what that does, though, Shawnee? Not to get off the topic, it does something really interesting, right? Because it really is cold. If you look at longitude, latitude, and you're looking across at Berlin and, in other words, other places, it's going to get cold there. And they're not going to have, let's call it, fuel this year. So they're talking about a spike in gas, like a 10x spike in the cost of natural gas or whatever they're using for heating their house and building Mercedes, etc. Are you following along? And when that occurs, I don't think it's, everybody says all the activity in the stock market, the tragedies are built in. They trade based on what they know is going to happen, and therefore they got it built in. So you don't see you do see wild swings, but you don't see wild swings to the point where it would be like a panic attack. But as I'm sitting here thinking about this, and you're watching this and listening to that, right? Maybe we're getting past this train strike, but nobody's thinking about trains. What if that strike took over, and now we have a new pandemic? It's the pandemic of you can't get cars because all cars get on a rail car before they get to a dealership's front door. I mean, how fragile that whole supply chain is. But then when you think about it, here's the war. We don't hear about the war in Ukraine anymore, even though war's going on much more than it ever did before. We stopped listening to it because nobody's hearing about it. And therefore, it's probably really not existing, even though it's definitely existing. And, the Russian-China thing where they're not out on CNN telling everybody what they're doing, but they got the whole idea what Russia's going to do with their fuel. It's going to China. So China's not going to have any kind of, in my estimation, any kind of, let's call it irregularity in their supply of fuel. But Europe is, right? And if Europe is, you got to make a decision. Are you going to make Audis, or are you going to keep your house warm? That could really get weird. So we never thought we'd ever see a pandemic that would create the insanity of the marketplace, which still exists to a large extent. We're still paying, MSRP for certain cars that are 2 years old, which is completely mentally impossible to understand. But we did it, and we're still doing it, even though it's not as bad because the market's going down, as everybody knows, right? But it's not going down to the point where it would be if we wouldn't have had the pandemic. And then you say, well, we're getting past the pandemic, but I'm not sure we're past a pandemic because it's not necessarily a medical thing or a flu or a virus. It's this thing that we really could bump into, which would have the exact same effect in terms of supply, right? If you don't have fuel, what's going to happen? And don't forget our fearless leadership, which, like them or don't like them, nobody could possibly say that it was a good idea to deplete your strategic energy reserve, right? Deplete it after you shut down your production. Deplete your reserve coming into a winter because you're coming into an election because you had a lower inflation. And gas did go down $1 a gallon, but it's not going to stay lower at $1 a gallon when we have a intercontinental competition for fuel. The only reason that's from a car dealer standpoint or from what we do for a living standpoint, I believe there's a pending potential pandemic. It's just not for a virus. It's a circumstance where fuel prices could go to a place where it ain't going to be comfortable for anybody. And it falls all the way back to production because if they start having issues where they can't get, keep the factories heat on, it's going to be interesting how that's going to affect supply. And if that affects supply, where are we? We're back to, April of 2000. Never going to be another new car. Now we have to depend on used cars, and like everybody's paying $20,000 over sticker price and all of the insanity that that transpired. It's really weird in your lifetime. In my lifetime, 50 years in the car business, the different things we went through, gas crises and different things, all different things. This war, the other thing, the credit default swap, the real estate, what do you call it? The whole thing, right? It's a pandemic, and right on the heels of that, with this, I think it could be weird. And it means nothing to us today because all we're looking to do is buy one and sell one immediately, fast, do a lot more time. Go to the auction, go sell 600. Hurry up! What are you waiting for? We don't think about what else is happening. Now, the good part of all of this is since we've had experience with what we did with no inventory and never going to be another car, and everybody needs a car no matter what. And it's if you don't have cars, you can't sell them, and all the rest of that. So we have. Everybody that's actually in the business today has that first round of experience. I guess the question becomes, do we really feel like going through a second one? And if we don't have the choice of going through it again, what that's going to look like by Christmas of this year. They're saying inflation went down, but now all of a sudden they're saying inflation's going up. The Treasury bills are flying like never before, right? Because everybody's looking for a safe haven, right? And, all of these indications are there's no real prediction in terms of what the tomorrow is going to be, right? That don't mean anything in terms of what the market's doing today. I think the market actually settled down pretty good. You can pretty much depend on what you're going to get. You got to take market value for cars. You can sell them straight through if you're ready to. There's buyers for everything, but you have to be prepared to sell it for market value. So I think to a large extent, I shouldn't say to a large extent because you're still seeing very few transactions on certain kinds of cars because the people that own them know they're worth more money. Even though they're not worth more money, they can't face the fact of what they're worth and they're not selling. But people that are selling and are adjusting to what they're buying and how they're buying it, I have a funny feeling. I know in our case, it feels pretty normal. It feels almost like you can feel the sand under your feet. We touch bottom and we actually know how to operate at this point in vast majority of categories, right? So what we're talking about this other, obviously not related to what you're doing today in a car dealership topic. The only thing is, it's a question of, is it going to be another circumstance, and is it something to actually I don't know how you pay attention to it or how you prepare for it, but I think it's a good idea not to be, let's call it, not aware of it. Does that make any sense to you at all, Shani?
Yeah, I think the warning signs are there, and just a reminder, because I noticed it too in the lanes the last few weeks, that things are starting to settle out. Buyer expectations and seller expectations are starting to meet again. But if there are warning signs, keep your pencil sharp because it isn't just the status quo from 3 years ago going through for another business cycle. It could change quickly.
Yeah, that's. I guess that's probably the moral. If there is a moral to the story, this rambling thing. When we went through a period where any Mickey Mouse, anybody that was breathing and alive with a temperature over 70 could buy and sell things because the profit was definitely there. Now we're back to reality where you definitely have to be paying attention if you're not going to get your nose cut off, right? And I think if we do wind up in one of these new type of pandemic circumstances, which I do not think is completely out of the realm of possible, not with a pandemic, but with a pandemic of other circumstances that create, supply chain issues that are not necessarily on the frontal lobe of people's thinking. You know what I mean? So that's all. It's not going to change what we're doing today. You got to go buy one and sell it, right? Just a thought in terms of, what we do for a living and how it could affect us. That's all.